Welcome to a journey through the shadowed corners of Texas, where history lingers and the spirits of the past walk among us. These tales will guide you through the eerie halls of haunted hotels, the silent battlefields of long-forgotten wars, and the ghostly echoes of places that time has left behind. Settle in, let your mind drift, and allow these stories to gently carry you into the world of the unknown. The air inside the Alamo changes as dusk settles, a quiet that seems to deepen with each passing moment. The old stone walls, once witnesses to fierce battles, now hold on to something more, a heavy stillness that feels almost alive, as if the memories of the past are still lingering in the very stones beneath your feet. As the last light fades, shadows stretch across the grounds, moving slowly like memories coming to life. In these hushed moments, when the world around the Alamo grows silent, there's an undeniable presence, something unseen but deeply felt. One of the most enduring parts of the site, the long barrack, often reveals its secrets in these quiet hours. There's some people who caught a glimpse of a tall figure, dressed in worn buckskin, standing near the entrance. Many believe this figure to be Davy Crockett, his spirit still watching over the place he once fought so fiercely to defend. Just as dawn begins to break, he appears, and then, just as quickly, he fades back into the shadows. Inside the Alamo's chapel, the air is cool and thick with history. The chapel served as a final refuge for many, and stepping inside, there's a chill that wraps around you. Not harsh, but more like a soft reminder of the lives that were once sheltered here. Faint whispers have been heard, gentle and distant, as if voices from long ago are still seeking peace in this sacred space. When the courtyard is bathed in moonlight, the past seems to stir. Figures of soldiers, their forms barely more than shadows, move silently across the grounds, reliving moments that have long since passed. Their faces, if seen at all, are calm, their movements slow and deliberate, as though they are part of a memory that time itself cannot erase. The Alamo's garden, usually a place of tranquility, takes on a more mysterious air as night falls. The soft rustle of leaves can feel like gentle footsteps, and if you're not careful, you might catch a fleeting glimpse of something, or someone, just out of the corner of your eye. These glimpses, brief as they are, leave a lasting impression, a feeling that you're not alone in this quiet space. Near the old well, where water was once drawn during the siege, there's a sense of stillness that feels almost too calm. Though the well has been dry for many years, some have reported hearing the faint sound of water being drawn, as if someone is quietly going about their work. Others have described a peaceful silence that hangs in the air, a reminder of the lives that once depended on this simple source of life. The guards who patrol the Alamo after dark often speak of a gentle, yet undeniable presence. They talk about feeling watched, but not in a threatening way, more like a quiet observation, as if someone is ensuring the sanctity of the site remains intact. Footsteps sometimes echo softly behind them, and doors that should be closed are found open, yet there's no sense of alarm, only a quiet acknowledgement that they are not alone. One of the most comforting tales surrounding the Alamo is the ghostly sentinels. These spirits are believed to stand guard over the Alamo, even now. After the battle, they were said to have been seen as silent figures, standing tall and resolute, protecting the sacred ground. It's said that those who encountered these sentinels quickly left the Alamo untouched, too afraid to challenge them. These sentinels, it is believed, still keep watch, ensuring the site remains a place of honor and remembrance. Even today, the Alamo draws those who are curious, those who seek to connect with the past in a way that feels tangible and real. Whether it's the spirits of the men who fought and died here, or something else entirely, the Alamo remains a place where history and the present quietly merge. It's a place where the past is not just remembered, but felt deeply. A reminder that some stories are never truly over, and some spirits never fully rest. A soft breeze whispers through the streets of Austin, Texas, as the Grand Driskill Hotel stands tall, its elegant facade hiding secrets within. The hotel, a masterpiece of opulence and history, has seen countless guests pass through its doors, but some have never left. The Driskill's halls are said to be haunted by spirits that roam, their stories woven into the very fabric of the building. The grand staircase, a centerpiece of the hotel's lobby, is where many have felt a sudden chill, as if unseen eyes are watching. It's here that the spirit of a little girl is often seen, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, her expression sad and distant. Legend has it that she was the daughter of a prominent politician who lost her life in a tragic accident on the stairs. Her footsteps, light and quick, are sometimes heard echoing down the hall, only to end abruptly in the silence of the night. Although it's not just the child spirit that lingers in the Driskill. On the 4th floor, a room known for its unsettling energy has become infamous among guests. Those who stay there report strange occurrences, flickering lights, the sound of someone knocking on the walls, and the unsettling feeling that they're not alone. Some say it's the spirit of a young bride who took her own life in that very room after being left at the altar. She's said to appear in the mirror, her face pale and her eyes filled with sorrow, before fading away like a wisp of smoke. The ballroom, once the site of grand celebrations, now holds a quieter, more haunting energy. Late at night, soft music can sometimes be heard drifting from the empty room, as if an invisible orchestra is playing a final waltz. Those who dare to peek inside often catch a glimpse of shadowy figures dancing across the polished floor, moving gracefully in a dance that ended long ago. The music fades as quickly as it began, leaving only the eerie silence of the empty ballroom. There's also the story of Colonel Jesse Driskill himself, the hotel's founder, who is said to haunt the halls. His presence is felt most strongly in the cigar room, where guests have reported the smell of cigar smoke lingering in the air, even when no one is around. Some have seen a tall figure dressed in a suit, standing by the window, gazing out over the city as if surveying his legacy. But when approached, the figure vanishes, leaving behind only the faint scent of tobacco. In the dead of night, the Driskill's long, winding hallways seem to stretch endlessly, the dim lighting casting shadows that dance along the walls. Guests have reported hearing whispers, soft and unintelligible, coming from empty rooms. Doors that were securely closed are found ajar, and cold spots appear without warning, as if the air itself is being displaced by something unseen. Those brave enough to explore the hotel at night often speak of a feeling of being watched, a presence that follows them through the corridors, always just out of sight. The elevators, too, have their own ghostly tales. They sometimes operate on their own, moving between floors with no one inside. Guests who find themselves alone in the elevator late at night have described a sudden, overwhelming feeling of dread, as if an unseen force is sharing the space with them. The lights flicker, and for a moment, the world outside the elevator seems to disappear, leaving only the pressing darkness and the sense of being trapped with something unseen. Each room in the Driskill holds its own secrets, its own stories of those who never left. As the night deepens, the hotel becomes a place where the past and present blur, where the living and the dead share the same space, if only for a fleeting moment. The Driskill Hotel stands as a monument to Austin's history, its grandeur undiminished by time, yet within its walls, the echoes of the past linger, haunting those who dare to stay. The abandoned Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Yorktown, Texas, looms like a forgotten sentinel, its once bustling halls now silent and decaying. But the silence is deceptive, for the hospital is far from empty. Within its crumbling walls, the spirits of those who died here linger, unable to move on from the pain and suffering they endured in life. The hospital was built in the 1950s and served the community for decades before closing its doors in the 1980s. It was a place where the sick came for healing, but not all left cured. Many passed away within these walls, their final moments filled with fear and uncertainty. It is said that these restless souls now haunt the hospital, their presence felt by those brave enough to venture inside. In the darkened corridors, the sound of footsteps echoes faintly, though no living person is there to make them. The hospital's once sterile environment has been overtaken by decay, and the air is thick with the smell of mildew and dust. But beneath that, there is another scent, faint but unmistakable, the scent of antiseptic, as if the spirits are still trying to clean the wounds that never healed. One of the most haunted areas of the hospital is the basement, where the morgue was located. Those who have dared to enter describe an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the walls themselves are closing in. The cold metal slabs where bodies were once laid out seem to retain the memories of the dead, and some have reported seeing shadowy figures lying upon them, only to disappear when the lights are turned on. The chapel, which is a place meant for solace and prayer, has also become a focal point for paranormal activity. The wooden pews, now covered in dust, creak under an unseen weight. It is here that people have heard the soft murmur of prayers, spoken by voices that are no longer part of this world. Candles, unlit for years, have been known to flicker as if touched by an invisible hand, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the operating rooms, where life and death were decided, hold an especially chilling atmosphere. Surgical instruments, left behind and rusted with age, seem to move on their own. The feeling of being watched is intense, and some have felt a cold hand brush against their skin, as if a spirit is reaching out, desperate to make contact. The sound of distant cries and moans can sometimes be heard, echoing down the halls from these rooms, a haunting reminder of the pain that was once endured there. Then the maternity ward, where new life was once celebrated. The echoes of the past are bittersweet. The cries of infants, long gone, have been heard echoing through the empty rooms. Some have seen the ghostly figure of a nurse, still tending to the needs of babies that no longer exist. Her presence is both comforting and tragic, a reminder of the joy and sorrow that once filled this place. Explorers who have ventured into the hospital's many rooms often speak of the sensation of being followed. Footsteps that mirror their own, whispers that seem to come from just around the corner, and the constant, oppressive feeling of being watched. Some have even reported being pushed or touched by unseen hands, as if the spirits are trying to communicate, to tell their stories, to make their pain known. The spirits of Yorktown Memorial Hospital will never rest, and those who enter are reminded of this at every turn. The hospital's decaying walls hold the memories of countless lives, each room a silent witness to the suffering and death that occurred within. Hotel Galvez, which is located in Galveston, Texas, stands as a beacon of elegance and history, its grand halls and luxurious rooms a testament to a bygone era. Yet beneath its polished surface lies a story of heartbreak and tragedy, a tale that has given rise to one of Galveston's most enduring ghost stories, the Lady in White. The story begins in the early 1900s, when a young bride-to-be checked into the hotel, awaiting the return of her fiancé, a sailor who was out at sea. She had planned their wedding down to the last detail, eager to start their new life together. Each day, she would stand on the balcony, gazing out at the ocean, waiting for his ship to come into view. But days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of him. One day, she received word that his ship had been lost in a storm, with no survivors. Devastated, the young woman locked herself in her room, overcome with grief. Unable to bear the pain, she took her own life in the very room where she had dreamed of her future. Her body was found the next morning, still dressed in her wedding gown, her face pale and peaceful in death. Since that tragic day, the lady in white has been seen wandering the halls of the hotel, her presence felt by many. She is often spotted in the ballroom, where she had once planned to celebrate her wedding day. Guests have described her as a beautiful, ethereal figure, dressed in a flowing white gown, her face a mask of sorrow. She drifts silently through the room, as if searching for something, or someone, lost to her forever. The most common sightings of the lady in white occur near the hotel's historic elevator. It's said that she often rides the elevator, the doors opening on empty floors where she steps out, only to vanish moments later. Those who have encountered her describe a sudden chill in the air, as if the temperature drops wherever she appears. Her presence is not malevolent, but rather filled with a deep sadness, a longing that tugs at the hearts of those who see her. In the room where she took her life, guests have reported strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, the sound of soft weeping in the night, and the feeling of being watched. Some have woken to see the figure of a woman standing at the foot of the bed, her eyes filled with sorrow. She never speaks, only watches, before fading away into the shadows. The hotel staff, familiar with the legend, have their own stories to tell. Some have seen the lady in white standing in the lobby, her gaze fixed on the front doors, as if waiting for someone to arrive. Others have felt her presence in the garden, where she once wandered, lost in thought, as she waited for news of her fiancé. The scent of roses, her favorite flower, sometimes lingers in the air, even when no flowers are nearby. Those who stay at the Hotel Galvez often leave with more than just memories of its beauty. Many speak of the lingering sadness that seems to permeate the air, a sense of loss that cannot be explained. The lady in white, with her tragic story, remains a part of the hotel's legacy, a reminder of love lost and the pain that never fades. As the years pass, the legend of the lady in white grows, her presence a constant in the ever-changing world of the Hotel Galvez. For those who believe, her spirit is a symbol of the enduring power of love, even in death. And for those who don't, stories of her sightings, told in hushed tones, serve as a reminder that some tragedies are never forgotten, and some spirits never truly leave the places they once called home. The West Texas desert stretches out for miles, a vast and empty landscape where the sky meets the earth in a blur of dust and horizon. It's a place where the silence is so profound that even the smallest sound can carry for miles. But as night falls, the desert near Marfa, Texas, becomes something else entirely, a stage for one of the state's most enduring mysteries, the Marfa Lights. For generations, people have gathered in the desert, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious lights that appear on the horizon. These orbs of light, which seem to dance and hover in the distance, have baffled scientists, intrigued skeptics, and inspired countless legends. But for those who live near Marfa, the lights are more than just a curiosity. They're a haunting reminder of a ghostly presence that refuses to leave. The lights, which have been seen since the 19th century, are most often described as glowing orbs, ranging in color from white to red to blue. They appear without warning, flickering and shifting in the darkness, sometimes splitting into multiple lights before merging back together. They can hover motionless for a time, then suddenly dart across the horizon, only to vanish as quickly as they appeared. One of the most chilling stories associated with the Marfa Lights involves a pioneer family who settled in the area in the late 1800s. The family, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity, built their homestead in the desert, unaware of the strange phenomena that awaited them. Soon after they arrived, they began to notice the lights, first as distant glimmers, then as closer, more persistent orbs that seemed to be watching the Ha. As the lights grew more frequent, the family became uneasy. The patriarch, determined to protect his family, ventured out into the desert one night, rifle in hand, to confront whatever was causing the lights. He never returned. His wife and children searched for him, but all they found was his rifle, lying in the sand with no trace of him anywhere. The lights, however, continued to appear, seemingly unfazed by his disappearance. Over the years, the story of the lost pioneer and the Marfa lights spread, becoming part of the local folklore. Some say the lights are the spirits of the Native Americans who once lived in the area, their souls unable to rest. Others believe they are the ghostly lanterns of long-dead miners, still searching for a way out of the treacherous terrain. But for the descendants of that pioneer family, the lights are a reminder of a more personal loss, a father and husband who vanished into the night, never to be seen again. Campers and travelers passing through the desert have often reported strange occurrences in the nights following their sightings of the Marfa lights. Some have woken to find their campfires extinguished, their belongings mysteriously moved, or strange footprints in the sand surrounding their campsites. Others speak of hearing distant voices carried on the wind, whispers that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. In recent years, the lights have continued to draw curious visitors, paranormal investigators, and even scientists, all trying to uncover the truth behind the phenomena. Some believe the lights could be caused by natural gases, optical illusions, or reflections from headlights on the distant highway. But none of these explanations seem to account for the lights' unpredictable behavior, or the eerie sense of being watched that accompanies them. The local community, however, has largely accepted the lights as just another part of life in Marfa. For many, the lights are seen as both a mystery and a part of the town's identity. While some may try to rationalize them, others embrace the legends, seeing the lights as guardians of the land, or as harbingers of something more profound, something that transcends human understanding. One of the most haunting stories was a ghostly figure seen wandering the desert near where the lights appear. This figure, often described as a lone man in old pioneer clothing, is believed by some to be the lost patriarch who disappeared all those years ago. He's seen walking toward the lights, only to disappear into the darkness, leaving behind no trace. Some say he's still searching for whatever it was that took him that night, bound to the desert by the same force that creates the lights. As the sun sets over the desert, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, the people of Marfa know that the lights may soon appear, flickering to life in the distance. For those who have grown up with the stories, the lights are a reminder that not everything in this world can be explained. They're a connection to the past, to the land, and to the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of understanding. The Marfa lights continue to captivate and confound all who see them. Whether they are spirits, natural phenomena, or something else entirely, they remain one of Texas's most enduring mysteries, a spectral presence that haunts the vast open landscape of the West Texas desert, inviting all who see them to ponder the unknown. The waters of White Rock Lake in Dallas, Texas, stretch out under the moonlight, calm and serene. But beneath the surface lies a story that has haunted locals for decades. Known as the Lady of White Rock Lake, this ghostly figure is said to emerge from the lake's waters, searching for something, or someone, that she lost long ago. The story begins in the 1930s, during a warm summer evening. A young couple was driving along the quiet roads that circle White Rock Lake when they spotted a woman standing by the roadside. She was dressed in a long white gown, soaked through as if she had just emerged from the water. The couple, concerned, pulled over and asked if she needed help. The woman, her voice soft and polite, asked for a ride into Dallas, explaining that she had been in a boating accident. The couple agreed and invited her into the car. She climbed into the back seat, her wet gown leaving a damp spot on the upholstery. The couple drove toward the city, but when they arrived at the address she had given them, they turned around to find the back seat empty. The woman had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the dampness on the seat where she had been sitting. Confused and unnerved, the couple went to the door of the house and spoke to the residents, hoping to find some answers. They were met with a chilling revelation. The description of the woman matched that of a young woman who had drowned in White Rock Lake years earlier. Since then, many others have reported similar encounters with the Lady of White Rock Lake. She is often seen on misty nights, standing alone by the water's edge, her white gown flowing as if moved by an unseen breeze. Some say she appears to be searching for something, her eyes scanning the dark waters as if hoping to find whatever she lost. Others have seen her standing by the roadside, waving down cars, always asking for a ride into the city, only to disappear before she reaches her destination. Those who have encountered her speak of an overwhelming sense of sadness that accompanies her presence. The air grows heavy, the sounds of the night seem to fade away, and for a moment, everything feels still, almost as if time itself is pausing to acknowledge her grief. The legend of the Lady of White Rock Lake has been passed down through generations, each retelling adding to the mystery and intrigue surrounding her story. Some believe that the lady is the spirit of a young bride-to-be who tragically drowned on the night of her wedding, her life cut short before she could start her new journey. Others think she might have been involved in a romantic tragedy, perhaps abandoned by a lover who left her to perish in the lake's waters. Regardless of her origins, her presence has become a permanent fixture in the lore of White Rock Lake. In the remote reaches of West Texas, there lies a ghost town called Shafter Lake. Once a bustling settlement during the early 1900s, the town is now abandoned, its buildings left to decay under the relentless sun. The land is dry and barren, and the lake, more of a shallow, brackish pond, reflects the desolation of the place. But even in its emptiness, Shafter Lake holds on to a haunting secret. The spirit of a young girl whose cries can still be heard echoing across the deserted landscape. The story of the crying girl begins with a tragedy that struck the small community when it was still thriving. In the early 1900s, a young girl, no older than 8 or 9, lived with her family on a small ranch near the lake. One evening, while playing by the water's edge, the girl slipped and fell into the lake. The water, deceptively shallow in some places, concealed deeper pockets that could easily trap a child. By the time her family realized she was missing, it was too late. They found her lifeless body the next morning, her small form caught in the reeds near the shore. The grief that consumed the family was unbearable. The girl's mother, in particular, was devastated by the loss. She would often be seen wandering the shores of the lake, calling out for her daughter, her cries filled with an inconsolable sorrow. Some say that her grief was so intense, it imprinted itself on the land, leaving behind an echo of her pain that persists to this day. As the years passed, Shafter Lake began to fade from memory, the people who once called it home moving on to seek better opportunities elsewhere. Town was eventually abandoned, and the lake, once a central part of the community, became a desolate, forgotten place. But the cries of the little girl never faded. Those who have dared to visit Shafter Lake in the years since have reported hearing the faint sound of a child crying, the mournful wails carried on the wind. The sound is said to be most prominent at dusk, as the sun sets behind the mountains and the shadows lengthen across the land. Some have followed the cries, believing them to be the echoes of the past. only to find themselves standing at the water's edge, alone, with no sign of the source. Others have claimed to see the figure of a young girl near the lake, her dress tattered, and her face hidden beneath a veil of long, wet hair. She is often described as standing still, her body slightly hunched as if weighed down by the water that took her life. Those who approach her report that she vanishes before they can reach her, leaving only the sound of her sobs lingering in the air. The legend of the crying girl has become entwined with the history of Shafter Lake, a reminder of the sorrow that once touched the lives of those who lived there. The land, though seemingly empty, holds on to the memory of that tragic day, and the spirit of the young girl remains tethered to the place where she met her untimely end. Local ranchers and travelers who pass near the lake often avoid it after dark, unwilling to face the haunting cries that have sent chills down the spines of even the bravest souls. The crying girl of Shafter Lake is a ghostly reminder that some tragedies never fade and some spirits never find peace, doomed to wander the land that claimed them, forever seeking a release that may never come. In the dry, rugged terrain of West Texas, Fort Concho stands as a reminder of the frontier days, a time when the U.S. Army outposts served to protect settlers and stagecoach routes from raids. Established in the late 1860s, the fort was a bustling hub of military activity during its heyday. Though the soldiers have long since departed, leaving behind only empty barracks and weathered stone buildings, the spirit of at least one soldier is said to still patrol the grounds, forever tied to the place where he met his end. The story of the ghostly soldier begins with a tragedy that occurred in the barracks near the fort's parade ground. A young private, new to the fort, and eager to prove himself, was assigned to night watch duty. One cold winter's night, as the winds howled through the buildings and the sky was dark with clouds, the private was found dead in his bunk. The official report claimed he had died of natural causes, but whispers among the soldiers told a different story. They believed he had been killed by something unseen, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. Soon after his death, strange occurrences began to plague the fort. Soldiers on night watch reported seeing a lone figure, dressed in full uniform, patrolling the parade ground. At first, they assumed it was one of their own, but when they approached the figure to relieve him of his duty, he would vanish into the night, leaving no trace behind. Those who encountered the ghostly soldier described him as young, with a determined look on his face, as if still fulfilling his orders despite being long dead. The ghostly soldier's presence was felt most strongly in the barracks where he had died. Soldiers who slept in the room often awoke to the sound of heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, as if someone were marching in place. Some reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature, the air growing cold enough to see their breath even when the fire was blazing. Others described the unsettling sensation of being watched, as if the soldier's spirit was still standing guard, keeping an eye on the living. One of the most chilling encounters occurred when a group of soldiers, gathered in the mess hall late at night, heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle being fired. They rushed outside, expecting to find an intruder or some sort of threat, but the parade ground was empty, the fort silent. As they stood there, bewildered, the ghostly soldier appeared, walking slowly across the ground before fading into the shadows. No one could explain the gunshot or the apparition, but it left them with a sense of unease that lingered long after. Even after Fort Concho was decommissioned and the soldiers moved on, the ghostly figure continued to be seen by those who visited the site. Caretakers, historians, and tourists alike have all reported encounters with the spectral soldier. Many describe seeing him standing at attention near the barracks or marching along the parade ground, his form solid and real until they draw too close, at which point he vanishes, leaving only the eerie silence of the empty fort. The stone chapel, which is now a historic site open to the public. Those who enter sometimes feel an overwhelming sense of sadness, as if the walls themselves are mourning the lives lost in service. On more than one occasion, visitors have reported seeing the ghostly soldier kneeling at the altar, his head bowed in prayer, only to disappear when they approach. As the sun sets over the fort, casting long shadows across the parade ground, the figure of the ghostly soldier may once again appear, patrolling the grounds as he has for over a century, forever bound to the place where he took his last breath. La Lomita Chapel, a small, unassuming structure with a history that stretches back to the 19th century. Located deep in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, just outside the town of Mission. Surrounded by mesquite trees and cacti, the chapel is a peaceful place, steeped in the rich traditions of the region. But as tranquil as it may seem, La Lomita is also said to be the home of a restless spirit, one that has been seen by locals and visitors alike, haunting the grounds where it once served in life. The chapel was originally built in the mid-1800s by missionaries who traveled through the area, bringing their faith to the remote corners of Texas. Over the years, La Lomita became a spiritual center for the local community, a place of worship and solace for those who lived in the harsh landscape of the borderlands. Priests and monks tended to the chapel, offering their guidance and care to the people who came seeking comfort. According to legend, one of these priests met a tragic end at La Lomita. The details of his death are murky, lost to time, but it is said that he was a kind and devoted man, deeply loved by the community. Some say he died suddenly, struck down by illness, while others believe he was the victim of a violent act, possibly during a raid or an altercation with outlaws. Whatever the cause, his death left a profound impact on the chapel, and his spirit is believed to have never left. Those who have visited La Lomita after dark often speak of a mysterious figure seen walking near the chapel. Dressed in the simple robes of a priest, the figure is often seen moving slowly through the grounds, as if in deep contemplation. Some people say he carries a lantern, its light flickering as he makes his way around the chapel, checking on the place he once tended to in life. Those who have dared to approach the figure describe a sudden drop in temperature and an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as if the spirit is mourning something lost long ago. Inside the chapel itself, the atmosphere changes as night falls. The air grows heavier, filled with a quiet tension that feels almost palpable. Candles placed on the altar have been known to flicker and go out on their own, and the faint scent of incense, long since burned away, sometimes lingers in the air. Those who kneel to pray have reported feeling a presence beside them, as if someone is kneeling in prayer as well, though no one else is there. The ghostly priest has also been seen in the small graveyard behind the chapel, where the remains of early settlers and missionaries rest beneath simple wooden crosses. Some say they have seen him standing among the graves, his head bowed as if offering a silent prayer for the souls buried there. Others have heard the faint sound of whispered prayers carried on the wind, though the words are in a language they do not understand. Over the years, stories of the ghostly priest have spread throughout the Rio Grande Valley, becoming part of the local folklore. Those who live near La Lomita accept his presence as a part of the chapel's history, a reminder of the devotion and sacrifice of those who came before. Some see the priest's spirit as a guardian of the chapel, watching over it and the surrounding land, ensuring that it remains a place of peace and reflection. The woman in white drifted through the 7th floor corridor, her form barely more than a whisper in the dim light. Her perfume, the delicate scent of roses, lingered in the air long after she passed, leaving behind a trace of sadness that seemed to cling to the walls. The silence of the Baker Hotel was thick, almost tangible, as if it held on to every sorrowful breath she had ever taken. In the spa, the air was unnervingly cool, a stark contrast to the warm Texas night outside. The sound of water, soft and rhythmic, echoed faintly, as if the pools were still full, though they had been dry for decades. A gentle breeze, carrying the memory of long-forgotten whispers, brushed past, sending a shiver through the quiet. Down the hallway, the old elevator doors slid open with a soft groan, even though no one had called them. Once the lifeline of the hotel seemed to have a will of its own, inviting anyone, or anything, still lingering to take a ride. Those who dared to step inside often found themselves on floors they hadn't chosen, as if the hotel itself was guiding them, urging them to explore its hidden corners. Where music once played and laughter filled the air, the ballroom was eerily silent now. But in the dead of night, the faint echo of a piano could sometimes be heard, its melody soft and haunting. Shadows moved across the floor, not in haste, but in a slow, graceful dance, as if the spirits of the past were reliving their most cherished moments, one last waltz before fading away. The darkness in the basement was almost suffocating. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the building's history pressed down from all sides. The rusting boilers stood like sentinels in the gloom, and sometimes the shadows between them shifted, hinting at a presence just out of sight. Voices, soft and unintelligible, seemed to drift through the cold air, brushing past like a barely felt breath. Near the elevators, the air grew colder still. It was here that the young bellboy's spirit lingered, a gentle presence that watched over those who passed by. The faint ring of a bell could be heard, distant and echoing, followed by the unsettling feeling of being watched. Many had turned, expecting to see someone there, but found only the empty hallway stretching out behind them. Throughout the Baker Hotel, each floor told its own story, each room holding on to its secrets. The creak of floorboards, the soft click of a door latch, the flicker of lights that had no reason to shine, all were reminders that the past was never far away. The hotel, with its haunting elegance, remains a place where time stands still, where memories cling to the walls like shadows, never truly fading, always just out of reach. In the heart of Jefferson, Texas, the Jefferson Hotel stands as a relic of the past, its red brick facade hiding a labyrinth of stories, some too eerie to forget. The hotel's history is long and tangled, with layers of time overlapping in a way that blurs the lines between the living and the dead. Those who have stayed there often speak of experiences that defy explanation, encounters that leave them questioning the very nature of reality. One of the earliest accounts dates back to the 1870s, when the hotel was a bustling hub for travelers and traders. A young woman, heartbroken over a love that ended in tragedy, took her own life in one of the second-floor rooms. It's said that her presence still lingers, a spectral figure that appears in mirrors, her sorrowful eyes staring back at anyone who dares to look too closely. Her story seems to replay itself, not just in one room, but across the hotel, as if her grief has seeped into the very walls. Jump to the 1980s, when a family stayed in that same room, unaware of its dark past. The mother woke in the middle of the night to the sound of soft crying, like that of a woman in deep despair. She followed the sound to the bathroom, where she saw a misty figure in the mirror, the shape of a woman, her face hidden in her hands. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. The sorrow in the air remained, hanging heavy like a damp fog. But the haunting of the Jefferson Hotel isn't limited to one spirit. In the 1940s, a guest reported seeing a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing wandering the halls late at night. The man was silent, his footsteps making no sound on the creaky wooden floors. When the guest tried to speak to him, the figure simply faded away, leaving behind a faint scent of cigar smoke. Decades later, in the 2000s, another guest encountered the same figure, this time in the hotel's bar. The ghostly man tipped his hat, smiled, and then dissolved into thin air, leaving the guest to wonder if the past had somehow slipped into the present. The hotel's front desk has its own ghostly tales. In the late 1990s, a clerk working the night shift noticed the old rotary phone ringing, though it had long been disconnected. When she picked it up, all she heard was static, followed by a faint whispering that sent chills down her spine. She put the phone down, but the whispering continued, now coming from the empty lobby. The next morning, the phone was found off the hook, lying on the floor as if someone, or something, had left it there in a hurry. Rewind to the early 1900s, when the hotel's kitchen was the scene of a tragic accident. A young chef, working late one night, was fatally burned in a fire that broke out unexpectedly. His screams echoed through the hotel, but when help arrived, it was too late. Since then, kitchen staff have reported hearing those same screams, always late at night, always when the kitchen is empty. Pots and pans are often found out of place, and the smell of smoke occasionally drifts through the air, even though the fire was long ago extinguished. In 2015, a couple staying in one of the third-floor rooms experienced something they could never quite explain. They were awakened in the early hours by the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth in their room, though no one else was there. The door creaked open and closed on its own, and when they finally gathered the courage to turn on the light, they found an old, dusty ledger lying on the floor. It was open to a page from 1923, listing the names of guests who had long since passed away. And then there's the story from just a few years ago in 2018, when a paranormal investigation team visited the hotel. They set up cameras and recording equipment throughout the building, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. What they found was more than they bargained for: footage of doors slamming shut, lights flickering without cause, and the faint sound of a piano playing in the empty ballroom. But the most chilling piece of evidence was an EVP recording of a voice whispering, "I never left." The Jefferson Hotel, with its rich history and layers of tragedy, seems to exist in a space where time blurs, and the past refuses to stay hidden. Each ghostly encounter, whether from a century ago or just last week, adds another thread to the tapestry of haunting stories that have made this hotel legendary. It's a place where the living and the dead cross paths, where echoes of the past still linger, waiting to be heard by those who dare to listen. The backhoe's blade bit into the earth, the sound of metal against soil echoing through the still morning air. As the workers dug deeper into the backyard of Sam and Judith Haney's new home in Crosby, Texas, they hit something hard, something that wasn't supposed to be there. What they uncovered sent a chill down everyone's spine. 2 wooden coffins, old and weathered, buried beneath what was supposed to be just another suburban lawn. The discovery was unsettling, but the real terror began when they opened the coffins. Inside were the remains of 2 people, their bones undisturbed for decades, perhaps longer. The Haneys, shaken but not knowing what else to do, reburied the bodies and tried to move on, but the ground beneath their home had other plans. Soon after, strange things started happening in the house, things that couldn't be explained. The faucets would turn on by themselves in the middle of the night, filling the silence with the sound of rushing water. Lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The air in the house grew heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was watching them, waiting. Judith began having nightmares, vivid and terrifying, where the faces of the dead stared back at her, their eyes full of sorrow and rage. The hauntings escalated quickly. One night, while lying in bed, Judith felt an icy hand grip her ankle, pulling her toward the edge of the bed. She screamed, waking Sam, who found her at the foot of the bed, trembling and pale. The terror in her eyes was enough to convince him that whatever was happening was real, and it wasn't going to stop. Neighbors began sharing their own stories, tales of mysterious deaths, unexplained illnesses, and strange occurrences that had plagued the community for years. Many of the houses in the subdivision were built over the old Black Hope Cemetery, a forgotten burial ground for African American slaves and their descendants. The graves had been unmarked, the bodies left to rest beneath the soil until the development began, disturbing their eternal sleep. The curse, as the locals began to call it, seemed to follow the Haneys wherever they went. Even after they moved out of the house, the darkness clung to them, an invisible shadow that refused to let go. Judith's health deteriorated, and Sam was consumed by guilt and fear, believing they had unleashed something they couldn't control. Other families in the area began to report similar experiences. Children would wake up screaming in the night, claiming they had seen figures standing at the foot of their beds. Pets refused to enter certain rooms, growling at nothing visible to human eyes. And in the quiet hours before dawn, the sound of shovels digging into the earth could sometimes be heard, though no one was outside. Desperate for answers, the Haneys and their neighbors sought help from paranormal investigators, who confirmed what they feared. The spirits were restless, angry at having their graves disturbed. The investigators suggested trying to appease the spirits by holding a ceremony to honor them, but the damage had been done. The ground beneath the neighborhood was cursed, a burial ground that refused to be forgotten, its restless dead reminding the living of their presence in the most terrifying ways. The Black Hope Cemetery curse became a chilling legend in the community, a reminder of the past that refused to stay buried. Even today, the stories persist, whispers of hauntings and unexplainable phenomena that continue to plague the area, as if the spirits are still searching for peace that remains just out of reach. The air in the Magnolia Hotel felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of countless secrets. The old building, with its creaking floors and faded wallpaper, had seen more than its share of history, and some of that history refused to rest. It was late, well past midnight, when the temperature suddenly dropped, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched crept over the couple exploring the second floor. A door at the end of the hallway, one that had been firmly closed, creaked open on its own. The couple exchanged uneasy glances, the thrill of ghost hunting quickly replaced by a creeping dread. They had heard the stories of shadowy figures, unexplained footsteps, and the spirit of a little girl who never left. But nothing had prepared them for this moment, standing in the dark, staring at a door that had no business being open. They approached slowly, their flashlights trembling in their hands. The beam of light caught a glimpse of movement inside the room, something small and fleeting, like the swish of a dress or the shuffle of tiny feet. The couple froze, their hearts pounding as they strained to listen. Then, faintly, a child's giggle echoed through the room, soft and playful, but eerily out of place. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. They had heard about it. The ghost of Emma, the young girl who had died tragically in the hotel so many years ago. It was said that she still played in the hallways, her spirit eternally caught in the innocence of childhood. The room, once a place of joy, now felt charged with her presence, as if she was watching them, curious and mischievous. Just as they gathered the courage to step inside, the temperature plummeted again, and the flashlight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows across the walls. The giggle came again, closer this time, almost right behind them. The woman spun around, her heart in her throat, but there was nothing there, only the darkened hallway stretching out into the unknown. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the floor above them, as if something heavy had been thrown across the room. The couple jumped, their nerves frayed by the relentless tension. They knew they weren't alone. Something was here, something that didn't want them to be. The stories about the Magnolia Hotel weren't just tales. They were warnings. The couple hurried down the stairs, the creaks and groans of the old building following them, almost as if it was alive, watching their every move. They passed the first floor, where it was said a shadowy figure often lingered in the corners, and the basement, notorious for its dark energy and ghostly apparitions. The building seemed to close in around them, every corner hiding something unseen, every noise amplified in the silence. As they reached the lobby, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, but the memory of what they had encountered lingered. The Magnolia Hotel, with its long history and countless stories, had shown them a glimpse of its spectral residents, those who had never truly left. They stepped out into the cool night air, the sense of relief overwhelming. But they knew they would never forget the feeling of being watched, of hearing a ghostly giggle, of standing in a place where the past was never truly gone. Footsteps echoed through the narrow, dimly lit corridor of the USS Lexington, though the ship was supposed to be empty at this hour. The few crew members on duty exchanged uneasy glances, their nerves frayed by the long hours and the eerie atmosphere that seemed to hang over the massive aircraft carrier. The Lexington, a World War II relic moored in Corpus Christi Bay, had been a museum for years, but something about this night felt different. Deep in the bowels of the ship, a cold draft swept through the passageways, carrying with it a faint whisper, indistinct, yet undeniably human. One of the crew members, a young man with more than a few ghost stories under his belt, paused mid-step. The whisper came again, this time clearer. A man's voice, calm but firm, calling out orders as if the ship were still in the heat of battle. The young man's heart raced as he realized the voice was coming from the engine room, a place where many had reported seeing shadows that moved on their own. He wasn't alone. Others had seen it too, the fleeting glimpse of a figure in an old Navy uniform, the sound of boots on metal decks, the inexplicable cold spots that would appear out of nowhere. Some said it was the ghost of a sailor who had died during a kamikaze attack in 1944, his duty to the ship never ending, even in death. Tonight, as the young man made his way to the engine room, the stories felt all too real. When he reached the entrance, the heavy metal door creaked open on its own, revealing the darkened space beyond. The cold hit him first, a chill that cut through his uniform and seemed to settle in his bones. Then, from the shadows, the figure appeared. A man in a Navy uniform, his face partially obscured by the dim light. The young man froze, unable to move or speak, as the figure turned slowly to look at him, eyes filled with a sadness that words couldn't capture. The sailor didn't speak, but his presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a sense of duty and loss that was almost tangible. The young man blinked, and in that instant, the figure was gone, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps that slowly faded into the distance. He stood there for what felt like hours, trying to process what he had just seen. Was it a trick of the light? A figment of his imagination? Or had he really come face to face with one of the USS Lexington's lost souls? Countless visitors and crew members have reported similar encounters aboard the USS Lexington. Some have seen the same ghostly sailor, always in his navy blues, always in the lower decks, as if still carrying out his duties. Others have heard the distant clang of tools, or the echo of long-forgotten drills, as if the ship itself were alive with the memories of its wartime past. As we leave behind these haunted places and the spirits that dwell within, let the whispers of these stories fade into the quiet of the night. May you find peace in the stillness, and let your dreams be calm and restful. Sleep well, and remember, even in the darkest corners, you are safe and at ease.